Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Day is Friday, the show where we dive into the stories and experiences from people from all walks of life. This is the podcast. We talk to everyday people with your not so everyday questions. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Today's guest is Mitchell. He is the host of the Dad Nation podcast and a men's peak performance coach. He helps career-driven men win in marriage, body, and mindset. If you're a husband, father, or a leader, this episode is for you. I'm excited to have you on, Mitchell.
Thanks for the invite, man. I'm looking forward to having the conversation. Thanks for having me on the show. And it's gonna be a powerful conversation, brother.
Yes, it will be. And for the listeners who may not be familiar with your line of work yet, can you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, man. So like you said it, I'm a peak performance coach to men. Typically, I help high performing or career driven men how to reclaim their homes, health, and their happiness. And really, what that means is, I have three pillars. Our marriages, our key relationships, our fitness, and our physical health, and then mindset when it comes to our happiness. But specifically around forming great habits, kicking bad habits, limiting self beliefs, insecurities, helping guys build more confidence, all those different things. And so, man, that's sort of the kind of client that I work with, and I help them see significant breakthrough in all those different areas. So that's what I do.
Yeah, what's your take on having a solid foundation in all of those areas?
Well, it's a massive question. So I here's the thing. A lot of people, in my experience, a lot of people are focused on the money. They're focused on the business. They're focused on the hustle, the grind, and they're trying to make it work, for whatever reason, to prove themselves, to, whatever, to create a life for their families, which is great, in itself in isolation, but it's not it's not a great goal in a vacuum. And ironically, a lot of the clients that I work with, or a lot of men I talk to, a lot of people who follow, my channel or listen to my podcast, are men in situations like that who have grown businesses or have been in positions of leadership or, achieved some sort of professional success, but unfortunately have gotten to the point where they don't necessarily know their wives anymore, or they don't know their kids, and the irony of this is they did all of these things. This drive, this ambition was to create a life for the family that they love. And ironically, now, the many men find themselves in the position where they're at risk of losing the things that they were trying to provide for this whole time. And so that's the wild part, man. And so this is why I dial into the personal side of things, because especially for men, usually, because the masculine is really driven by accomplishments, by excellence, by mission and purpose. And so working hard isn't usually a problem for us, or having, going to work and really locking in is usually when we come home that we struggle, right? And specifically marriage, I say a lot of my clients, so that marriage is unique in the sense that everything in life could be going wrong, but if your marriage is going right, none of it matters, right? Now, on the flip side, everything in your life could be going right in business, but if your marriage is going wrong, none of that matters. Our significant others, our family lives significantly impact everything we do. And so it's so important for us to not just be great in the workplace, or not just be great, with hustling and grinding and all those different things, but also to be great at home, to show up in a powerful way as a husband, as a father, right? And if we can get those things dialed in, man, we can really see far more productivity at work, far more, when it comes to, some of my clients being CEOs, driving, revenue, things like that. When their company is healthy and their employees are going home to happy homes, they're so much more productive. They're so much more content, and when they come to work, right? Because these things aren't affecting their home life. And it's one thing that not a lot of people talk about, especially men, because we're not necessarily comfortable with talking about what's going on at home or what's going on in our personal life. We're happy to talk about professional, but personal not so much. Does that make sense?
No, that's such a good point, but what's the bigger lesson there? Can you tell me more about that?
The bigger lesson in what specifically?
For men to, is it to provide? Is it like a happy wife will make a happy life? Is that the bigger message, or what is it that men need to do to really have a solid foundation on their life?
Yeah, a happy wife, happy life is a very flawed mentality. And I would say if you believe in that, you if you're not already bitter and resentful, you will become bitter and resentful toward your wife. Because what that happy wife, happy life mentality does is it forces the man to bury his needs and to bury his passions, to die to everything that matters to him in his life, to just submit completely to his wife and his family. And it's like the old adage about about the oxygen mask. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can show up for your family. But unfortunately, a lot of men are not wearing that oxygen mask. If the plane is going down and they're sick and they're tired and they're overwhelmed, and a man can only take that kind of pressure for so long. And so the flipping the script would be to take care of yourself, right? Because a healthy man can't, an unhealthy man can't lead a healthy family. It doesn't really work that way. Um, and so instead of happy wife, happy life, I usually tell people, man, happy house, happy spouse, or happy spouse, happy house. You know what I mean? You both need to work together to one another's contentment and fulfillment. And so speaking to your partner and saying, "Hey, how can I help you? With meeting your needs. How can I help you see your dreams come to fruition?" And then flipping the script and then asking you, "How can I help you meet your needs? How can I help you see your dreams come to fruition?" And when you both have that attitude of service toward one another, that's the sweet spot. And that's really what you want to be. That's where you want to be in your key relationships. Because ultimately, the big lesson here is if you can't take care of yourself, how could you ever take care of a company or your family or a home or a marriage or anything else? And so it all starts with self leadership. That's why with my clients, that's one of the first things we get into is the 6 layers of self to master. And one of the biggest ones is self leadership. How am I leading myself well first? How am I how am I making great decisions to set myself up for success? Because if I don't lead myself, how can I expect to lead anywhere or anything else? Does that make sense?
Yeah, holding yourself accountable at the end of the day, and really, like you said, put the oxygen mask on you first. I mean, what's your take on how men can win at marriage without losing themselves?
Yeah, well, that's a combination of a few different things, but a lot of a lot of the reason why marriages tend to struggle is because of a lack of understanding of one another, how we're wired, and how we think and how we process, right? And so when you think about, the masculine versus the feminine essence, in the book, The Way of the Superior Man by David Data, he says, um, the masculine will always be perplexed by the feminine, and the feminine will always be perplexed by the masculine. It's because we're wired differently, right? We just the way we think, and so like I said, the masculine is driven by accomplishments, is driven by excellence, achievements, all those different things. The feminine is driven by nurturing, intuition, emotions, relationship, right? And now again, I'm not saying feminine equals woman and masculine equals man, because you can get more feminine men and you can get more masculine women. But generally speaking, just so that your listeners are aware, I'm speaking in generalizations. So for example, if you were to go to a Super Bowl party, I always use this analogy because it helps people make sense of it, and it's where we see this sort of played out often. Where do you see most of the men gathered? Around the
Around the
TV,
TV, yeah.
right? Around the sports, around the football, because they're driven. They're compelled like moths to a flame by achievements, by excellence. And what are these athletes? They're some of the best in the world. They have some of the strongest mission and purpose in the world. They're excellent in what they do, and we're drawn to it, right? Where are the women? Usually
The food and kitchen
around the
and
food in the
talking to each
kitchen,
other.
drinking some wine, catching up. How are the kids? How are you doing? How's your, how have you been feeling lately? You sad? Whatever. How's marriage? And they're connecting on an emotional, relational level. They're acting on their intuitions. They're valuing, like nurturing relationships with one another. So now it's a generalization, but it's important to understand that we're both wired in completely different ways. And so you have to understand, number one, you're probably never going to fully understand your spouse if you are masculine and they are feminine. And that's not a bad thing. You're wired that way for a reason, because you're supposed to complement one another. The masculine and the feminine complement one another. That's just the way it works. It has been, at least for the last at least 2,000 years. So I don't see it necessarily changing anytime soon. So with that, number one is understanding you're different. And so because of that, we have to have tools and resources, and we have to develop certain skills to be able to bridge that gap when we don't understand one another, right? Matthew, have you ever heard of love languages before?
I have, but if you can go in a little bit more depth of them, I don't know all of them.
Yeah. So there's a few things that we could get into. So like love languages, there's core values, there's our family of origin, there's all these different big pillars as to ways that we're different. But for the sake of time today, we'll dig down into the concept of love languages. Um, Now, the premise behind this is that we all have very specific love languages. And what those are is ways that we prefer to be loved, ways that we receive love. Um, and so there's five of them, right? So number one, and in no particular order, one is acts of service, meaning when someone helps us do something or does something for us, that makes us feel loved, right? Quality time, when someone spends time with us, is quality. Again, not on our phones, but FaceTime, Um, Gifts is another one. Gift giving. So if someone has a love language of gifts, it means they really appreciate when you buy them gifts or give them gifts or make them gifts. Physical touch is another one. And that's pretty obvious. We feel most loved when we're touched physically. And the fifth one is words of affirmation, which means verbal compliments, words of encouragement, and things like that. And so the premise behind this is that we have some combination of these love languages. And usually we have a primary love language and a secondary love language. And these love languages are formed from our childhood, from like even from infancy on, right? And so they're usually formed out of either an abundance of something or a deficit of something, right? So for example, I'll give you some context. In my situation, growing up as a young boy, my mother loved me through acts of service. She did everything for me. She like cleaned my room, she made the meals, she did the laundry, she did, and so from a childhood, the way I learned how to receive love from, especially from a female relationship, specifically maternal, was through them helping me with things and serving in that way, acts of service, right? My secondary love language is words of affirmation. And that is because there was a pretty big deficit of encouraging words or affirming words growing up in my home. Our family did not say I love you. They didn't encourage one another. And so I grew up really craving that. And so as a young man, when I went into dating, relationships, and intimacy and all those different things, the two things that I wanted to receive the most was acts of service and words of affirmation. Now, what that means, why that's important, is because when you get married, you need to understand your spouse's love language, or in your, you don't have to be married, it could be in any relationship, could be a relationship with your kids, right? You need to understand that person's love language because that's how they receive love. That's how they have been receiving love for years. And so my wife's love language, for example, is quality time and physical touch, which is totally opposite of mine, right? And so what that means is, if her love language is quality time and physical touch, it doesn't make sense for me to buy her a bunch of gifts because it doesn't mean anything to her. It doesn't make sense for me to, be showering her with compliments because words of affirmation is not her love language. Her love language is quality time and physical touch. So what makes the most sense for me is to rub her back, is to hold her hand, is to put my hand on her leg when we're driving, is to hug her, touch her, right? And then when I'm with her for the quality time, it's important for me to put my phone away, turn the TV off, give her my eyes, give her my undivided attention to give her that quality time. But here's the kicker is you are most inclined to love how you would like to receive love. So what's easiest for me is to compliment her because remember, my love language is words of affirmation. And it's easier for me to serve her through acts of service because that's my love language. So early on in our marriage, I would like make breakfast or dinner and I would be complimenting her and I'd be doing all these things for her. And she just didn't really appreciate it. It didn't really, there wasn't a big ROI, and so, but the problem was when we would get into a situation where I was trying to love her and she wasn't receiving, it was frustrating for me. So I'm like, well, look at all that I'm doing for you. She's like, well, what do you mean? You're not, and we didn't know the concept of love languages back then, but I was doing a lot of stuff. I was just doing the wrong stuff, and it wasn't really landing. And so understanding that love language, then I said to myself, well, how can I get strategic? Like a lot of my clients, in the context of business or career or, going after their dreams or whatever, they're very strategic and focused. Like if you want to grow anything, you need to be intentional and focused. And so why not make those strategic moves in the love languages that your spouse or your partner can receive? And so same thing with her, right? And so that's just what we've done now is to love one another well is to love them in a way that they can receive through their love language. And so any of your listeners, if you're having a hard time in your relationship, I would do just a love languages test. You could just Google a free love languages test. It'll take you 5 minutes and it'll spit out the report of what your love languages are. And then you can have that conversation with your partner and say, what does it look like to love you through your love language? Does that make sense?
Yeah, communication is key, it sounds like, in your any type of relationships, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, most people don't think about it that way, and that kind of perspective we need more of.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I agree for sure. And I think the more intentional we can get when it comes to our key relationships, the better they'll be. I mean, but so many people think a good marriage just happens on autopilot. It's like, no, not a chance. This requires the most intentionality, and there's the most on the line because there's no more an intimate relationship where you're so exposed than with this person. There is no greater uh, factor that impacts your trajectory, both in your career and your health and everything, than your spouse, because you spend so much time with them. You spend your entire life with them. So if any relationship is important to be very strategic, very focused, and learn how to communicate well, it's in this one, right?
No, that's very good advice. That can be life changing for some people. And for me personally, I've learned that for men, if they ask their spouse or their girlfriend or whatever they have in their life, how are they feeling emotionally? Usually they'll tell you. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. A lot of men don't think to do that. And it's because there's a psychological term called normative male alexithymia, and you can look it up. But really, what psychologists use that term to explain is just that men in general have been raised in a, again, generalization, but have been raised in a culture that tells them that it's not necessarily okay to talk about your feelings. That men need to suck it up, right? Real men don't cry. And so we're raised in a culture that says, no, 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 that's not for here. That's not for now. You need to just like suppress that. Um, and when you think about it, let's think about our generations. Like World War II, for example, we're what, 3 generations removed from a situation where our great grandfathers experienced uh, trauma like nothing else and didn't have the tools and resources to talk about it. And so what did they do? They came home and they didn't talk about it. And then they usually, a lot of them, medicated with alcohol, drugs, you name it. PTSD is real. It was real, and still is very real. But these men raised sons, right? And their sons observed their emotions and how they talked about their feelings, which they didn't. And then those men raised sons and again didn't have anything to model for them. And so we're just a few generations removed from significant um, emotional trauma and without really a lot of tools or resources on how to openly process and discuss and communicate their emotions. And we still, and probably still will for generations to come, wrestle with it a little bit. And so we find it difficult to talk about our emotions ourselves, but we also find it difficult to even ask our spouse or our wives or whatever to talk about their emotions because, well, what happens if they answer and then they say they had a really bad day and their friend is upset or their mom said this or, well, now what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to give her advice? How do I fix that? I don't know how to fix that. Emotions aren't my thing. And so what do? We play it safe and we just ask the same boring questions. How was work? How'd you sleep? How are the kids? And you get the same dead end answers. But what our partners need is for us to engage with them on that emotional level, not so that we can fix, right? The goal isn't to fix the problem. It's simply to listen and to hear and to, your spouse's biggest 3 needs are to be seen, heard, and safe. Seen, heard, and safe. And seen and heard, those 2 needs often can be met in a big way by simply just listening to how they're feeling, not fixing, but empathizing with them. By saying things like, "Hey, that's really tough. I'm sorry you're experiencing that." And then just not necessarily saying, "Hey, here's 10 things you can do to fix it." You know what I mean?
No, I know that's a really good point. And so basically, men are making things harder than it needs to be.
100%. 100%, man. I'll never forget the first time I had talked to my wife and I said, "Hey, I'm struggling with some insecurity around a certain area." And she just looked at me, she stopped like I basically had to pick her jaw off the floor. And she said, "Thank you so much for inviting me in to your life emotionally. Like, thank you for just trusting me with that." And she said, and I'll never forget it. She said, "It's so good to know that I'm not married to a robot." Right. And I think as men, we want to feel like we got it all on lock. We got it under control. We don't want to be, we don't want to make them feel like we don't want to let them into what's going on the inside because that's not our job. Because remember, going back to this normative male alexithymia, like, don't talk about it, don't talk about it. But when in reality, the one thing that they do want is to be invited in and for you to actually share how your day is going, how you've been feeling, some fears you might have, or some victories you might have, whatever. And so we overcomplicate it because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about ourselves and we don't ask them. And then because of some random thing, for some false narrative that we've been believing forever, but ironically, again, we do this because we're trying to like protect them or make them feel like we're confident we got it all figured out. But in reality, by doing that thing, we end up driving them further away because, generally speaking, a wife or a woman needs to be connected with on an emotional level. So if we're not connecting with them on an emotional level, we're not making a connection. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, can you take me back to that moment that happened when you opened up to your wife? How did that make you feel, and how did your relationship grow from there?
Yeah, I did it because I was on the verge of a panic attack, and I felt like I didn't have any other choice. Um, things had gotten bad, and my story is kind of a wild one, but it got to a point where I had no other options left. We were in a very bad place in our marriage. We're on the verge of divorce, and I was overwhelmed. I was stressed with work. We weren't getting along, and I felt like the way I'm doing things is not working. And it's, the old adage, the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same things, and expecting a different result. I'm like, I can't keep doing the same thing. And the same thing was shutting her out. The same thing was not talking about how I'm feeling. And so we went to see a therapist, and then he had asked me, when was the last time you told your wife about what was going on the inside, right? And she would ask me all the time, how are you, right? How was your day? And I would answer her with what I did that day, right? And she'd say, no, no, I'm not asking you what you did. I'm asking you how you felt today. Those are very different questions. And so I interpreted, how are you? How was your day? As in, what did you do today? Because that was what I was comfortable talking about, right? And so I had to learn how to answer that question. But at that point in that moment, that was the first time I had said, you know what, I got to try something else. And she said, how are you doing? And I said, actually, babe, I'm pretty overwhelmed. And I got this big proposal coming up. I'm feeling really insecure. Like, why would these people listen to me? And I just totally let her in. And it was scary. I don't even know why, because she's my wife. Why would I be scared to talk about that? But again, it goes back to how we're wired. But the end result was amazing. It drew us closer that at that point than we had ever been, because she had felt like I connected with her on an emotional level. And all it took was me to literally just answer her questions thoughtfully and meaningfully and be honest about where I was at emotionally. Because here's the thing, man. Another way that we're different is men and women, when we talk about emotions, emotional connection and physical connection, most women need to be engaged emotionally before they can engage physically. And men are the opposite. Usually, we need to be engaged physically, and then the emotions will come after. So we're actually polar opposites of one another. And so men will go to their spouse trying to get all physical and not make the emotional connection. And it doesn't work that way. They need to be engaged emotionally first, right? So yeah. Anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, that was that moment for me for sure when I talked to her about how I was feeling and how we connected on it after.
No, that's real. I mean, you're not alone in that. A lot of people need to hear that. And just to circle back to what I said, just ask them. Ask your spouse, how are you feeling emotionally? And that can go just very far for you in your relationship. And I really want to ask you, what's one small thing men can do daily to strengthen their marriage?
Mm. Yeah, man. So one small thing is touch points. People think that marriage, to have a great marriage, you have to do these big grand gestures and big vacations and big expensive lavish gifts. It's not. It's not that way at all. In the same way that a great marriage isn't built by these big enormous gestures. Um, it's made by small daily deposits. And it's the same way that a marriage is eroded, is by small daily withdrawals, right? Doing something that doesn't build into your marriage. And so I would say, before I answer your question, I'll say this. Marriages, like I said in the beginning, don't happen. Great marriages don't happen by accident. It takes it takes intentional time, intentional effort over time. And so one simple thing you can do is I ask my wife 3 questions most days. And these 3 questions are just designed to engage her on an emotional level, and to show that I support her, right? To help her feel seen and heard. That's the 2 of the 3 needs. So the first question is, what was a bright spot in your day today? Or what's something that when you look back over your day, you're thankful for? Maybe it was the way our son laughed, or maybe it was a great conversation you had with a friend over coffee, or maybe it was something you talked with your colleague around, about around the water cooler. What was a bright spot in your day today? And watch them sort of unfold as they tell you about their day. That also helps us focus on the positive, right? Because we don't have a proclivity to be focused on the positive. We generally just think about the negative things. And so it helps us practice and cultivate the skill of gratitude, right? So, number one question, what was a bright spot in your day today? The second question, what was difficult about your day today? And that allows them to, again, get something off their chest, right? And it allows you to practice listening to them and make the commitment as you're listening that you're not going to suggest anything until she lets you know, right? So the first question, what was a bright spot in your day today? Second question, what was difficult about your day today? And then the third question, and that's connected to the difficulty, is how can I help you? How can I support you in that? Because remember, you're not saying, hey, here's 3 ways that you can fix that to get out of that rut. You're not imposing your skills on her or telling her how to feel. You're just saying, hey, how can I support you? How can I love you through that difficult thing? And she might say, hey, can you help me with this thing? Great. She also might say, actually, babe, I don't really need any support, but thank you for asking. Or she might say, could you actually just like let me talk about this a little bit more? Just like hear me out, and then let her talk, right? But the question is, however she answers that question, how can I support you? How can I love you through that difficult thing? Then take those words seriously and follow through with the action. So those 3 questions, simple, but it's a daily deposit that you can do to connect to your spouse. And it works in the inverse. If you're a woman and you're listening, and your partner, you want to draw closer to them, a guy would appreciate that as well.
It seems like the number one key in any relationship is communication, and having the right type of communication is the key to having a strong relationship. Asking the right questions at the right time. It's crazy how small changes can make the biggest difference. And I've heard this before. Like, if you have good communication with your spouse, or just relationship that you have with someone, if you ask them, what's your battery level at? And then if they go 20%, go, well, you know what? I'll pick up that 80%. I got you. If you just have communication like that, so you know where they're at, it can go so far in the relationship, because you'll know, okay, maybe I'm at 50% and, she needs to pick me up a little bit. If you have communication, it can go the distance in the relationship, and communication is key.
100%, man. That's the big breakdown in every marriage is communication around the big topics, communication around finances, communication around sex, communication around children, disciplining, communication around expectations, communication around family, all that stuff. But if we're not communicating well, we can't meet one another's needs. And at the end of the day, a relationship is a partnership. How can you serve one another, right? How can you make each other better? And so, yeah, man, I agree.
The number one fight in marriages is over money.
Yeah,
It's the most
100%.
cause of divorces too. So it's like, it's very sad in our society that that's what's making relationships crumble and fall. But how can men rebuild confidence after setbacks in life or marriage?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and I would say, let's talk about how men become how men find themselves in a situation where they lack self confidence. And that's okay. So Matthew, let's think about this. if I was to come if I was to come visit you, and I said, hey man, I'm gonna drop by your house 7:30 every Tuesday evening, and we're gonna have a coffee, or we're gonna have a beer together or something. And you're like, oh yeah, man, let's do it. And then the first evening, I don't show up until 9:30. You can be like, hey man, what happened? I thought you said you'd be here at 7:30. I'd be like, yeah, I was busy, whatever. The next week, I show up at 9:30, 10, and you'd be thinking, that's weird. He also didn't show up at 7:30 the last time. Well, what happened, man? Sorry, the next week I didn't show up at all. The next week, it would take maybe 4 or 5 times before you would lose confidence in my ability to follow through with the things that I said I would do, right? Because I just didn't show up. I made a promise to you, and I broke it, and I broke it, and I broke it, and I broke it. And so you lose confidence in our relationship, and my word, and everything. And so the same thing happens in ourselves, okay? Because just because you make a promise to yourself doesn't mean it doesn't matter, because there's a subconscious mind we have to contend with. And so what happens is when we break promises to ourselves, we erode our relationship, we erode our rapport with ourselves, And so what happens is when you say, I'm going to show up and I'm going to love my wife today, or I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. and go to the gym, and you don't do it and you don't follow through, then your brain says, see, I told you, man. Like, if you can't even trust yourself that you're going to follow through with the promises that you made to yourself, why would anyone else trust you if you can't even listen to yourself? And so your subconscious mind begins to work against you, and that rapport starts to work against you, and you become insecure because you've lost trust and lost relationship with yourself. So we lack self-confidence, like we would lack confidence in any other relationship where we broke promises, right? Does that make sense?
No, that's huge. I mean, most people wouldn't even realize that's the problem.
Well, totally. And so how do we reverse it? We make small promises and we keep them time over time over time. It's the same way that if Matthew, if you were to say to me, if I came to you and I was like, hey man, I really want to make this work. You'd say, okay, prove it. Show up at 7:30. And then after 3 or 4 times, and I'll start believing that maybe you're serious this time. It's no different in our relationship with ourselves and our mindset, our subconscious mind. So what I get my clients to do is, one of the first things I do is saying, what are 3 promises you can make to yourself today, and that you're going to have me hold you accountable, and maybe your spouse or other people in your community, to make sure that you follow through with those 3 things you said you would do. Because subconsciously, then you're starting to prove to yourself that, no, I am a trustworthy person. I can follow through. Maybe I am a fit person because I've been getting up consistently. I made a promise that I get up at 6 a.m. and I go to the gym, and I've done that for the last 3 weeks. Okay. So what happens is you start stacking wins and you build rapport with yourself, right? And so that's how a man can rebuild his self-confidence. So one of my questions is, where are the areas that you are most insecure? Because it's in those areas that you have broken the most promises. If you are most insecure in your marriage, most likely you've broken the most promises in your marriage. If you're most insecure in your fitness and your physical health, it's probably because you've broken the most promises. You didn't go to the gym, or you overate, or you're, whatever, right? You're overweight, whatever the case is. Observe your life, look at where the most broken promises have been, and those are where you're most insecure. So how do we do it? We start reversing the process and making promises to ourselves and keeping it. And over the course, you do that for 90 days, man, 3 months, you'd be unrecognizable. You'd be on fire with confidence, because it's inevitable. It's just a part of, you're outworking your own self-doubt, as Alex Hormozy says. So hopefully that helps, or that resonates.
No, that's a great takeaway. It's practical and easy to apply.
100%. And the big thing is to have someone that's holding you accountable, because here's the thing. The only thing that's worse than that is making that promise, working this big thing up, and then saying you're going to do it and then not following it through again. Because the brain, again, is just trying to make sense of the world. That's how our brains work. We're trying to be efficient. It really just wants to keep you alive at the end of the day. But it's always looking for you to make sense of what's going on around you. So when you break a promise, then it says, see, I told you, you did it again. This is who you are, man. You just break promises. You're not trustworthy. And then it begins to re-solidify that negative self-narrative, that self-sabotage, or that limiting self-belief. And so that's why it's so important to follow through, because each time you do that, you're ingraining that narrative even deeper into your brain through the concept of neuroplasticity, which we could talk about another time. But that's the danger of doing it again. So what do? Get yourself around a community of people. And if you're a man, get around other men. If you're a woman, get around other women. Tell them your goals and get after it, and have them hold you to the standards that you set for yourself, right?
It's crazy how small changes can make the biggest difference in someone's life.
100%, man. I was almost divorced. I was 60 pounds overweight. I was almost $100,000 in consumer debt. I mean, anxious, medicating, you name it. I was a mess, and I entirely transformed my life through daily action steps. And so what I did to lose the weight and to pack on the muscle, to restore my marriage, to get out of debt, to, build my dream career, is exactly what I teach my men to do. And at the end of the day, it's these systematic steps, right? And it all starts coming full circle to the beginning of our conversation. It all starts with leading yourself. It all starts with the self first. That's why if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't expect to accomplish much of anything, right, that you really want to most in life.
I bet you a lot of people struggle with that.
Absolutely. I built an entire business off of it because so many men are struggling, not just men, but women too, and they don't know how to talk about it. They don't even know they don't have the language to talk about it. Even if they did have the language to talk about it, they wouldn't feel comfortable talking about it because of the culture and society we live in. And we're lonely. We're lonelier than ever, and we're more medicated than ever, And so it's becoming more and more difficult to talk about these things and to get the help that you need. But in reality, it's actually not that complicated. It's quite simple. It's just not easy, right? And there's a big difference. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Now, Mitchell, with all the years of experience you have, I mean, how do you help men find their purpose beyond the paycheck?
Yeah, we dig into those three areas because those are the three areas that impact everything else. Um, like if you don't have quality relationships at home, if you don't have your physical health, if you don't have a healthy mind, then what's the point in having money if you're coming home to an empty house? If if you got a high net worth, but Christmas you're standing around a Christmas tree alone, what's the point? What's the point in having a big house and no one to share it with? Right? What's the point in going on lavish vacations if you lost your kids and your wife and you're just alone, right? What's the point in making a ton of money if you're not even going to get to walk your daughter down the aisle one day or see your son graduate, right? Steve Jobs talks about, he's not interested. He talked about before he passed about he has no desire to be the richest man in the cemetery, right? And so that's a powerful image. What point is there in to gain wealth and gain the world if I lose my family and lose my soul and lose my mind in the process, right? So this is why I do what I do, because for me, I was that guy because I grew up in dysfunction. I grew up with an alcoholic father. I grew up with crime in my home, with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and I was on that path. When I got married, I could hear my father's words. I could feel his anger. I could feel our marriage. I could feel everything going right back to the how I was raised, because that's how we were wired. And so I dedicated my life to changing that narrative for myself and then helping other men change that narrative for themselves and to end these generational curses that hold us down. And this is why I say at the beginning of my podcast episode, every single episode, it's like, this is not just about the men, but this is about the women and the children and the generations to come, because we believe that every man and father, or every wife and child, deserves a man who is pursuing greatness, right? Who's creating a life with them and for them that they otherwise wouldn't have had. But we can't do that if we don't start from within, right?
No, that's a powerful way to look at it, and it really shifted the mindset, like my mindset on that. I mean, how important is physical health when it comes to like leading your family?
Well, I'll say this. Statistically, if you're 350 pounds, your kids are going to grow up to be 350 pounds. If you're not denying yourself, if you're not taking care of your physical health, your kids won't. Your kids will do what you do. They won't always do what you say, but you better believe that they're going to do what you do. They are your greatest imitators. You are their blueprint. And so if when it comes to physical health, if you want to have healthy children, then you need to become that healthy person. You need to become the person you want your children to become, because they will become you. And so why is it important? It's because, and especially as men, there is a certain weight that you carry in the home when it comes to your emotions, how you show up emotionally, how you show up physically, how you show up mentally. And so if your kids see you stressed out, slamming M&Ms and Oreos, or coming home with McDonald's and everything because you had a hard day, or if they see you slamming rum or vodka or gin because you had a hard day, they're going to do the exact same thing when they get to be your age. And so for me, and I ask my clients this often. I had this conversation with a guy a couple days ago. He had said, he talked to, he wanted to get his health under control, and he's overweight. And I said, if you don't mind me asking, man, how heavy are your kids? Because I knew that his kids were going to be overweight. And sure enough, they were at least 40 pounds overweight for their age. And it just happens over. And when we talk about generational cycles, again, it's not just about marriages and mindset, and it's about health too, right? And so, why should you focus on your health? Because not just your health depends on it, your spouse's health depends on it, your children's health depend on it. We know statistically that if you spend time, like if you spend time with like obese people, for example, I'm not saying don't be friends with obese people. Yes, please, because you can, let's just help one another out. But statistically speaking, your chances of becoming technically or statistically obese is up to 65% if your closest friend is obese. I mean, think about that. That's crazy, because we are mimickers, we're mirrors, and we just observe one another. And so, especially when we have influential relationships, right? And so, what's the most influential relationship? Is a child to a parent. So, if you're listening and you're a parent, or if you're listening and you want to have kids one day and you want them to be healthy, um, become that person for them today. That's your best chance at getting them to live a healthy life moving forward. Does that make sense?
No, that's very good advice, and that can be life changing for some people out there, you know. And Mitchell, I really want to ask you, what is your definition of a strong man today?
Hmm. That's a great question. I would say balance, man. Balance of the masculine, certainly understanding that we're not, I hate the term toxic masculinity. And I would say toxic masculinity, I would rephrase that to be immature masculinity. Is this alpha mentality, like everyone needs to bend to my will, I'm wearing the pants, blah blah blah. Like that is not healthy masculinity. But at the same time, it's also not being really weak and being soft and being, a victim, right? And being just woe is me and my life is the worst. And, it's understanding how to be a strong man in today's age is to have number one is to have a strong sense of purpose, to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, to be completely focused and being intentional in every area of your life, to be in control. Because if you are being mastered by something, you are not in control. If food has a control over your life, if alcohol has a control over your life, if anything, social media, if there's any addiction that has control over you, you don't have control over that, which you will always feel like a victim if that's the case. But strong men are in control. Strong men let nothing control them. And so get control of the things in your life. Have the emotional awareness and the emotional maturity to understand that there is a pendulum here. To know when to be strong and to be rigid and unshaking and unmovable is important, but also to know when to be uh, emotionally available and to connect with your wife on an emotional level deeply, and to be able to speak about your emotions and to be able to embrace how you're feeling and to communicate how you're feeling in a healthy way without medicating, without numbing your mind. All those, there is that swing back and forth on the pendulum, and to be able to do that as a man, I think is so important in today's day and age. It's not the man from the 40s and the 50s, right? And it's not the ultra feminist man who doesn't necessarily understand some of these traditional uh, ways that we've been living for the past thousands of years. There is a middle ground, and the middle ground is the modern man, is someone who can live in that pendulum swing and know what season or what day requires what. Because there's going to be times when I show up at work and I'm showing up into a boardroom and I'm leading a team of executives or whatever. They don't need someone who's like not assertive and who's soft and who can't take control. They need someone who's going to like assert in the room, who's going to have a strong vision and be focused and driven. But when I get home from when I check out and I leave the boardroom and I come home, my wife does not need that. She needs someone who can see her, who can hear her, who can love her, nurture her. So then I got to swing to the other side of the pendulum and be like, what does it look like for me to show up powerfully, just as powerfully as I did in the boardroom, but now, in the bedroom, really, or, in my personal life with my spouse or my kids, right? And so a strong man today is proficient and can happily swing around anywhere in that pendulum. Hopefully that connects.
No, that definition of yours is powerful, and I appreciate you sharing that. And now this is the part of the show, that the Friday mindset part of the show, and I want to dig into your journey and your mindset and the moments that shaped you. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Hmm. Um, Probably one of the best was one of my mentors had said to me, going back, maybe talking a lot about marriage, so we may as well stay on that theme. My wife would say back early on when we were going through the difficult time, she would say, I feel like you don't love me. I feel like you don't love me. And I would get frustrated because I'd be like, of course I love you. I'm telling you I love you. Like, look at all that I'm doing. I love you, right? What do you expect me to do? And then I would get frustrated because it would make me feel incompetent, right? And it would belittle all my efforts. And one of my mentors said to me, if she is saying that you don't love her, you are not loving her. You're not. Because her feelings are her reality. Her perception is her reality. And so if you're not loving, if she's saying, I don't feel like you love me, then you're not loving her. Like, don't you understand that? And he said, it's not your responsibility to keep hammering, no, I told you I love you down her throat. Obviously that's not working. And then he taught me about the concept of love languages. And he said, what does it look like for you to love your wife in a way that she can understand, in a way that she can receive? And that's when the first light bulb went off. And I was like, okay, I'm ramming this down her throat because I'm doing cooking her meals. Again, acts of service, right? I'm like cleaning up. I'm, doing all the things for her. And I'm telling her she's beautiful, and I'm telling her all that stuff. But those were my love languages. I was loving her through acts of service and words of affirmation. That is not her love language. It's quality time and physical touch. So the best thing I could have done, instead of get up and make her breakfast and make her favorite smoothie and clean up the house while she lays in bed, that's not actually what she needed. all because again, her love language is quality time and physical touch. What I should have done was just lay in bed with her and rub her back, hold her hand, and just talk with her, because that would have been loving her, right? That would have been loving her in a way that she could receive. And so, how do you love your wife? Well, in the ways that she can receive. Otherwise, you're not. If she says you don't love me, then that's her reality, and that's the truth, right? And it took me a while to grasp that. And when I did, it changed everything.
That's powerful.
Mm.
And you just got to really dive into communication and understanding what love languages are for you and your spouse at the end of the day. And for anyone out there struggling with their confidence, what should they do?
Yeah, just going back to what I was saying, you can just do a quick audit. Observe all the areas of your life where you're most insecure. Are you insecure in your career? Are you insecure in your fitness, in your physical health, in your body? Are you insecure in your marriage? Are you insecure in your fatherhood or your motherhood? Are you insecure in, any of these big bucket areas in your finances, right? And then observe which areas you are most insecure in, and that is the area where you've broken the most promises. And so then if you identify, okay, I'm most insecure in my finances, for example. Okay, well, where have areas in my finances, where have I gone wrong? Where have I made commitments and not followed through? Well, and then you do an assessment. I make a budget every year, every January, and I do it for about 30 days, and then I fall off track, and then I keep overspending, and I keep overspending, and I keep going into debt. Or if it was fitness, I'll make a resolution to go to the gym every single year, or you know, and so then make promises in those areas and reclaim, your rapport with yourself to start stacking wins, um, because that is how you're going to become more self-confident in that given area. And you might have multiple areas, and that's fine. So you just gotta do some deep work and find out those areas and dig into them and make promises and keep them. And here's the thing, they have to be small, right? If you're not meeting your goals, they're too big. And I might be the first person who will ever say this to you if you're listening. But if you're not meeting your goals, lower them, lower the bar. Because the only thing worse than an unmet goal, um, is a goal that you never make again because you're so insecure because the last time you did it, you didn't meet it, right? So remember, I talked about that negative spiral effect it has. So make small promises that you can commit to and keep, right? And so for example, some of my clients who have been very overweight, I'm not going to stick them on some crazy plan, some crazy diet plan, learning all this food to eat and make. What I do is I say, hey man, can you walk around the block twice a day? Can you not drink soda or pop? You know, could you maybe cut out gravy? Small commitments and keep them. And then after you've made those promises and kept them, then you can start making bigger ones. So that same person, I'd say, okay, let's try driving to the gym. Not even going in, man. Let's just try driving to the gym, parking in the parking lot. I could bang out a couple push-ups and go back home. All right? I'm not going to say we're going to go to the gym 7 days a week and give them a big workout plan. That's way too much. And then after a while of going to the gym, driving there, getting used to that rhythm, then we're actually going to go in. We're going to try one workout or two, you know? And so it's slow, sustainable commitments that you can make and keep. It's consistency over intensity always, because if you can't do it for the rest of your life, there's no point in doing it at all.
That's
So
great insight.
that's what I would do if I was anybody listening.
No, that's a great takeaway. And just write down your goals at the end of the day, And then if you can't hit them, lower the bar, like you said. And Mitchell, I really want to ask you, what is something significant from your childhood that shaped you into who you are today?
Hmm. This is a little bit heavy. Um, but I mentioned that I come from a broken home, and I was having this conversation actually on another podcast a little while ago, and I was brought back to a time when I was 9, and I was laying in my bed, and I remember my dad came home, and he had been driving. He was drunk, and he had driven home drunk, and my mom was very upset, and she was screaming at him, and he was screaming at her, and I remember at 9 years old, and I just recalled this memory like literally a couple weeks ago, so it's pretty fresh. Um, I remember at 9 years old thinking, when I grow up, I want to do something so that I can help other kids so that they don't have to experience this, so that they don't have to hear mommy and daddy screaming and yelling. And that memory changed the trajectory of my life, because today, 32, 29 years later, that's exactly what I'm doing. I have started this mission, the Dad Nation, the podcast, the coaching, the community, so that I can help men step up and love their families in powerful ways, so that their children know a loving, strong, courageous, and compassionate father, and so that they don't have to have that experience laying in their bed at 9 years old. That was my memory that changed my life.
No, thank you for sharing that. I love that. Um, Continue to keep on chasing your dreams because your dreams won't chase you. I appreciate you sharing that. And that was powerful. I appreciate that. And the show was called Every Day is Friday. And Friday has a special energy, whether it's freedom, excitement, or just feeling of accomplishment after a long week. I really want to hear from you. What does Friday mean to you?
Mm. Friday for me is an acknowledgement of work, hard work well done, right? Something to be proud of. I have my clients walk through a framework, and then we make significant deposits in the big areas of our lives, and one of those is to work hard. And at the end of the day, at the end of the week, work week on a Friday, we can celebrate all that we've done, that we put in our best efforts, that we can rest our heads on the pillows at night on Friday night, knowing with full confidence that we have worked hard, that we've given this life everything that we could, that we've showed up powerfully as husbands, as fathers, as mothers, as daughters, as whatever your situation is, and that we can go into the weekend with peace of mind and relax and to refresh ourselves and to pour back into ourselves after a week of good work put in, So that's what it means for me. It's time to reflect and celebrate.
Yeah, I mean that's a very powerful mindset. I appreciate you sharing that. And this is your chance to leave the listeners with something powerful. Is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, man, I would just say, if you listen to my show, I ask the same question at the end of every podcast episode, and it's about what kind of legacy we're going to leave. You know, and the question is when your time comes, it could be today, it could be next year, it could be 30 years from now. But here's the thing about time is the only currency that we spend without knowing the remaining balance. All right, I'll say that again. Time is the only currency that we spend without knowing the remaining balance. So you've just given me 60 minutes of your time, which is significant, because I don't know how much I have left, right? And so I might walk out and get hit by a bus. You know, the question becomes is what will I be known for at the end of my life, or what would I be known for now? If my friends were hitting up the pub or going for a coffee and they're talking about Mitch, the man he was, the father he is, whatever. What would I be known for? Would I be known as a man who wasn't fully present, who put himself, was selfish or didn't help others or didn't, was distracted or, whatever would I be known for? Being a man who added value to every relationship he had, to be a man that helped others, who loved his wife fiercely, who was an incredible father, all those different things. And so for me, That's always the question I'm asking myself. And I write, I have my clients go through a eulogy writing exercise where they actually write out their own eulogy of who they want, what they want to be said at their funeral about the man that they were. And so each day is an opportunity to write, because at that funeral, at that memorial service, people will tell stories about who you are. Your life will write a book, and when you're gone, people will read that book and they'll tell people the chapters of who you were. And so the question that you need to ask yourself is, what chapter am I writing today? Because each new day is a new opportunity to write a new chapter. So what chapter are you going to write today in this book of your life? That's one thing that I would encourage your listeners to take some time to think about.
I resonate with that so much. I thank you for sharing that one, because like it's so true. I thought about this the other day. Like I always wanted to like fake my death to see what people would say about me at my funeral. You know what I mean? Because like you don't know what they say until you never know what they say,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's just the legacy you're leaving behind, and that's what will be told about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And all your information will be in the description down below. But I want to make sure people know where to find you. Where can people follow and support your work?
Yeah, man, you can follow me on Dad Nation Co. At Dad Nation Co. on Instagram. That's where I hang out mostly. And I tell you what, man, for anyone listening today, you can just put these notes in the show notes, or put this link in the show notes below. But we talk about connecting with your wife. I have a free gift called Igniting Intimacy, and that's 50 of my favorite questions that you can ask your spouse to connect with them on a deeper level. It's primarily targeted towards men, but it's a PDF that has 50 of questions about your life, your love, your leisure, your fun, like a bunch of different things. And this can help you when you're going out on a date or going for a walk or whatever. It can give you questions to ask your wife to connect with her on a deeper level. You could do that. Just click the link in the show notes. You can download that PDF for free. And that'll be my gift to you to thank you for listening for 60 minutes, because as we said, it's a big deal. And if you're looking for coaching, I do that as well. That's primarily what I do: one-to-one coaching and also group coaching. Again, for career-driven men who are looking to reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness, and be happy to have a conversation with you about what that could look like to help you level up in the areas that matter the most.
Mitchell, I know the listeners got a lot of value out of this. It's been an awesome conversation. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for sharing your stories and experiences.
You're welcome, brother. Thank you for having me on the show. This has been a pleasure and honor, and I hope that something that I've shared today will have added value to each person listening. And look forward to keeping the conversation going, brother.
Yeah, you inspired me. And to the listeners, stay tuned for more amazing stories on Every Day is Friday Podcast 365. If you enjoyed this, make sure to follow, share, and keep Every Day is Friday mindset going. Until next time, stay inspired. Until next time,